I saw this article come through my feed a couple days ago. Today being actually December 19th, the first day of Hanukkah, which is actually kind of relevant to this article. I might even address that a little bit. This came out 2 days ago, and this came through general media feed. And I see these articles come through all the time. You guys probably do as well. It always seems like the media loves to highlight whenever there's a decline, article about a decline in Christianity specifically, but a decline in religion, more of a push to atheism, just being atheists, or just secularism in general, and people ditching religion and tradition altogether. People, it seems like the media just loves to promote that. It's actually focusing on a book that was made that the article is based on, which again, this article is called "A Mass Exodus from Christianity is Underway in America, and Here's Why." I actually found this article really fascinating and telling in a number of different areas. That's kind of why I want to make a video about this, because I think there's a lot of things that highlight what the problem is, and then also I think what the solution might be, especially for someone who's maybe thinking about becoming more religious. You are religious. You want to evangelize your family and friends and just strengthen your faith as well. What are some things you can do to actually combat this culture that I think is really pushing people away from religion? Now, this article is actually based on a book that just came out called Nonverts, and it's by this author, Stephen Bullivant. And right now you can see it's a #1 bestseller on atheism. If I didn't look closer into this person, although it says in the article, I probably would have thought he was an atheist, but actually he's a Catholic, and actually writes specifically more on Catholicism, and about how the people leaving the church for post-Vatican II. In this book, he talks about Catholicism in the time of coronavirus, the salvation of atheism in Catholic dogmatic theology. Kind of interesting stuff here. Again, I wouldn't have thought he was a Catholic, but he is a Catholic in good standing, promoting the Catholic Church. He is kind of more highlighting issues about people leaving religion in general. You can see especially in this new release. And I've actually looked on this a little bit. It does seem like evangelicals are taking a greater hit than other traditional classical religions like Catholicism or Orthodoxy. You're seeing people kind of return to that a little bit more so, but still I would say religion as a whole, but definitely Christianity as a whole is on the decline. And that's what this article kind of gets into. So what I first like about this is just even this first little paragraph for a couple sentences here. It says, well, the number of Americans who celebrate Christmas as a cultural holiday is going strong. There's been a shocking rise in the number of people ditching Christianity, which sociologists call nonverts. So a nonvert is someone who just leaves religion or Christianity specifically and has no intention of converting to really anything else. Maybe they mean specifically Christianity, but I think they're saying just no religion. And first, I'll just say right here, you guys have probably all noticed this too. I mean, the thing we all like, every Christian or someone who's somewhat religious, some sort of Protestant or you'd say denomination of Christianity always knows that we hate the idea of commercialization of Christmas, but we're all victims to it. And we all basically have seen, I noticed this, that everybody seems to love Christmas now. Everyone loves Christmas movies, the holidays, quote unquote, and people love celebrating it, but they just have no intention of actually learning the faith. It doesn't really stimulate the faith. It's just a holiday season. They kind of like that whole, everything that goes along with it. And I've noticed that even at my church yesterday, we had a kids like the little kids play, what's like a little mini pageant. All the parents love it. All the adults kind of loved watching it. And this, I saw them a lot more. And it makes sense. But the point is, these same people I see that are kind of lit up and they bring their kids to these pageants. They never come to mass. They just come for these events and the traditions. We've heard the classical stories, right? They go to the holiday days and they kind of don't come to anything else. So they kind of check out throughout the rest of the year. And I think that's probably an issue, which we'll get into here. But keep going out this article here. It says that Pew Research suggests that estimates that Christians will be a minority of Americans by year 2070 if the trend continues, which I kind of think it will unless something happens. And they're saying it's not really, at the top of this article, it's not necessarily about these like hot topic issues that we think it would be about. Like, I can't see these words because my YouTube flags my videos here if I do that, but they say it's more about the Cold War, 9/11, and the internet is the argument here the authors are trying to make here. I think it's more with the internet, honestly, which I'll get into. It's kind of all streamlined together. And it is saying the largest percentage of those people losing their religion are young adults, again, about as old I can reference that REM reference there. People around 30 and under, and I'm close to 40, and I got to see, firsthand that a lot of people, my friends who were maybe raised going to church at least once in a while, now that they have kids, they really basically only go to church on the holidays. They have no intention of going to, say, if they're Catholic, weekly mass. It's really just Catholic is just like a thing they do strictly out of like just habit, why they baptize their kids, etc. I made videos on that. It's unfortunate. But the point is, I got to kind of see this slow decline. It was kind of the writing was on the walls here a little bit. So they're saying that young adults are the people that are leading this mass exodus. And so I'll read this up here. It says each person has a complex story. There's no like kind of one size fits all story. But it says, for example, the largest demographic of non-verts, younger adults, will raise their children as nuns, or knowns, I'm not sure I want to say that, people from non-religious families. And while a tiny percentage of non-verts return to religion, knowns rarely embrace religion at any point in their lives. Now, I can personally attest to this because I have a wife who grew up with a Jewish mother, Catholic father, as far as about like what they were raised in, but they chose to raise their kids with no religion whatsoever. So my wife grew up with absolutely no religion, even though they quote unquote like celebrated Christmas and Hanukkah. They weren't taught anything at all about any of those religions, but what they're even doing. So their whole life up until adulthood, they celebrated these things and they had no idea what they were doing. So you would think like it sounds kind of crazy if you're not used to doing that, but there's a lot of people that actually do that. And I think that's going to be the future, is someone like my wife. Now, by the grace of God, throughout a couple different attempts, she's actually very religious, or becoming more religious, and actually going through converting. She's actually formally going to be in the Catholic Church through RCA this Easter. So by the grace of God, that's a great thing. But that was one of the things she struggled with. And I won't get into this whole side tangent, but you can tell, my wife will admit to it, she wanted religion and she missed out on not having that, even though she couldn't really articulate that. And my point is, yeah, she is a big exception. Unless you meet someone who's religious like me, and I wasn't the best, most religious person either. They call it our side story. The point is, the odds of them converting to any religion, these non-groups, are going to be exceptionally rare. And honestly, this is the other ironic thing, is that when they do convert, their parents, who kind of in their mind thought, well, if they want to be religion, if they want to embrace religion, that's fine, it's up to them, but we're not going to force it. We're not going to put it in part of our family as an important part. The ironic thing is that when they do, like in my case, you find there is pushback from their family. So in my case, that was the case. Even though they seemed like they didn't care, deep down they did care. They just didn't want their family being religious. And that's a whole other side tangent I'll get into. So the article progresses here into saying, this move towards secularism happened incredibly fast in the United States, relatively. And they kind of give you guys like a breakdown here of the percentage of non-religious adults by generation. And they're kind of wondering, okay, what really happened? What was the cause for this? Why now? And they go into basically the long and short of it. They say, there's a difference between like the Cold War and this kind of idea of like this relation between Christian America versus godless communism, where it was kind of like a stigma that you really could never not claim to be religious because you might be considered or labeled a communist, which, again, I'm not going to say this is always the case, but whenever I find people that are anti-religion, they also seem to be very sympathetic to communism or socialism, definitely liberalism. So I'm not saying that goes hand in hand, but that's what I'll just leave it at that. Versus they're saying in Europe, they're saying it was okay to explore secularism a little bit, versus in America, it was, again, kind of stigmatized. And you had a few people that were saying, like here, agnostic, atheist influencers in both parts of the world. There were some coming up, but they were still relatively few. So after the Cold War, and they say once you get to 9/11, you had people questioning organized religion in wake of like terrorist attacks, saying, well, this is the problem, organized religion causes violence. And again, I've certainly heard that from my in-laws, that organized religion causes more fighting than not, when that's, we can get into the whole debate there. But they're saying, yeah, more people coming out openly speaking out against it. Public, pronounced atheists like Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins. And it became, quote unquote, okay or most socially acceptable to actually start going down this rabbit hole of exploring the merits or possible merits of being non-religious. Versus they're saying if you're raised in a small town here like Texas or Idaho, where everyone's a Christian in their world, in this article, that it's harder to be exposed to and less likely to maybe be influenced by secular groups and secular atheists. Basically what they get into is they're saying, well, there's various opinions change. You have socio-cultural norms have changed, which we can, whatever side of the aisle you're on here, obviously that's something. But they're saying how that can kind of leave an influence somewhere. And they say it's the rise of secular rather than religious cult figures after COVID that have definitely influenced this. Now, in my opinion, this to me is really the thing. I think you're getting, the whole article sums up a lot of good points. What I would say the biggest reason why people in my age group are leaving religion is because they are very easily influenced. They don't see the reason or rationale or merits of traditional practices, raising your kids, raising your family, living your own life in a religious moral backdrop, versus just being, well, everything is somewhat relative. I'm going to be influenced, especially if you're like a guy. I mean, this is just one simple example. Everyone is influenced by like what Joe Rogan says. I have people around me that if he does something or something's on their show, to them it's just like, well, everything, the mind can be open. You're you're leaving yourself open to all different points of view, most of which are secular and pointing to religion not being necessarily good, with the exception of like people like Jordan Peterson. I think he's someone who's proponent of like the merits of traditionalism in general, that most people are just influenced in these wrong directions. And I actually, that goes back to my original point about, evangelicals, kind of people leaving evangelical churches for more traditional practices, like you could say just Orthodox Christianity in general, because there is some order, there's some tradition kind of encapsulated into that, and in my opinion, a little more academic than I would say evangelical theology is. That's not to be a shot though. But my point is, and all this is saying that everyone is so easily influenced by the culture. And so to me, the best way to kind of guard against being influenced and being pulled away from religion is to really watch what you're viewing and really second guess everything you're watching. I think we all know that we're very easily influenced. Marketing, programming, and figures that are very popular in the spotlight tend to be those that are not religious. They don't tend to push people that are religious, promoting things like moral virtues. I don't want to say conservative ideals, but I'm just saying ideals of some living your life with a certain kind of code, living a life that's certainly kind of grounded in God and God, moral teaching and moral law. You just don't see that as much. And so what really influenced me for sure growing up was that influence, seeing that I could have this open mind. Things are relative. Seeing that other people weren't doing these traditional things. What I thought was tradition was kind of archaic. I thought it was always kind of going to be there. It's never going to go anywhere. It's always in a nice little backdrop. But now we're discovering that if we don't keep this stuff alive in our families, in our groups, in our own personal faith lives, that tradition is going to go away, or it's going to be a very small little microcosm of what it was. And while, yes, the holiday season, those big, grandiose, really the commercialized traditions will always be there because they make a lot of money. The heart of the season, the best part of being a Christian, the best part of the religion is not the commercialization of it. We all know that. It is the fruits of living the faith out that really you don't know about unless you actually practice it and do it. So me being older, me being a little more wiser, being someone who actually got to change my life I have a lot of kids now, but after my first kid, in the middle of that, seeing how different my kids' lives and my own life, my marriage and everything else would have been if I was living that secular lifestyle where religion was just something you did to kind of check the box. How meaningless, I shouldn't say meaningless, but how much less fruitful it was compared to where it is. I think the general public has no idea about those things, and it's kind of sad. And I think this is the reason why people feel like they're leaving it. They're just not sold on the true merits of the holiday, the true merits of what it means to be a Christian. So they're getting this false commercialized sense of Christianity and what tradition is. And unfortunately, it's no different than the Christmas story we've all known, that the Christmas idea, Christian idea, can be hijacked very easily. And it's not really fully fleshed out and understood unless you live it out. So my point in saying all this is that this is the result of people leaving the church is because of influences, cultural influences that we have to guard ourselves against, guard our family against it. And there's nothing wrong with having an open mind to explore these things, but show them both sides of the coin. If you lived on both sides of the coin, like I have, like I know many people have who come back full force into tradition, organized religion, you know exactly what it was like on both sides of that spectrum. So you have to communicate that, versus when I was growing up, that was not fully adequate and communicated to me. If anything, actually, my parents grew up with the fruits of tradition, and they didn't think it was necessarily that valuable. They just kind of let it kind of, go by the wayside, so to speak. To a certain extent, they did a lot of other great things, but I wasn't taught the value and the importance of upholding and keeping the traditions and the importance of knowing the Spirit and living out our faith of Christianity, a Christian faith. So that's it. Kind of definitely turned into a ramble video. Really great article. I think it's important. I think it's important to kind of meditate and think about these things. I'd love to hear your guys' questions and comments on it. Went way longer than I thought to you, but I'll see you guys in the next one.